Hey folks, I'm Jeff Hirsch, and in today's video, I'm going to show you everything that's new and improved in Lightroom Classic version 15, which was just released by Adobe. We'll take a look at all the new features included in the latest major release, along with some of the smaller updates and refinements that have been included. Before we get started, you'll need to make sure that your computer's operating system is compatible with the minimum requirements for Lightroom Classic version 15. Be aware that Adobe has dropped support for Mac OS Ventura, aka Mac OS 13 and earlier, as well as Windows 11 versions 22H2, 21H2, and earlier. The first time you launch Lightroom Classic version 15, your existing catalog database will be backed up to an old catalogs folder, and then it will be upgraded to support the newest program features. Once your catalog has been updated to version 15, you're ready to jump in and start working with the program. Let's start off with the major new features before we move on to some of the smaller tweaks. For Lightroom Classic version 15, the big marquee feature that Adobe has added to the program is something called assisted culling, which is an AI-driven system for weeding out bad shots, like ones where your subject is out of focus or has their eyes closed, or ones where the shot is over or underexposed. This tool has the potential to be a real time saver for portrait and event photographers who frequently must sort through hundreds, if not thousands, of photos to find the best shots. At the very least, it can quickly reject bad photos that you would have had to eliminate by hand. And even if you don't do portrait photography, there are still some features within this assisted culling tool that might come in handy for those of you who shoot other subjects. So you'll want to stick around during the demo to see how it might help your workflow regardless of subject. Adobe considers this new assisted culling tool to be an early access feature, which means it's still undergoing improvements and is being released to the public for extended testing and refinement. They've been doing this sort of early access business more and more frequently in recent years, offering much wider public access to pre-release and beta test versions of both Lightroom and Photoshop, so that users can help them track down bugs and improve features using a feedback system. The early access label lets us know that Adobe thinks the feature is ready for widespread testing and usage, but that it still needs some of the kinks worked out of it. Any feedback you provide them when using this feature will be used to improve future iterations. The assisted culling function is available in the library module and also as part of the import dialog. First, we'll take a look at how the basics work in the library module, and then I'll show you how you can apply assisted culling during the import process if you prefer to do it earlier in your workflow. In order to utilize the assisted culling feature, you'll need to go into your catalog preferences, click on the Metadata tab, and under the section for AI analysis, tick the box that reads Analyze photos of selected source when assisted culling panel is open. I do not recommend that you enable the option to automatically analyze all photos in the catalog, as that can be very processor intensive and will have a noticeable impact on performance. Just like the face detection feature in Lightroom, I suggest you only enable this as needed on a case-by-case basis. Once you've enabled this preference, all you have to do to begin assisted culling is to open the pane in the right side panel of the library module and start selecting the culling parameters you wish Lightroom to apply. Note that if that preference that I just mentioned has not already been set, the first time that you go to open the assisted culling pane, Lightroom will helpfully offer to enable that AI analysis for you. Once you've got the assisted culling pane open, you'll see options available for selecting, rejecting, viewing, stacking, and organizing your culled images. And you'll typically work through them from top to bottom, starting with the Select section. Images can be selected based on the subject being in focus, the eyes being in focus, or the eyes being open instead of closed. Checking any of those boxes will cause Lightroom to analyze and categorize images that have these parameters as being selected. And once you've told Lightroom which images to mark as selected, you can then tell it which images to reject. Images can be rejected if they are identified as being one of a document or a receipt instead of a photo, if the camera has misfired in some way, or if there are exposure issues like an over or underexposed image. Checking any of these boxes will cause Lightroom to categorize images that have those issues as being rejected. You can then choose to view groupings that will show you all of the selected images, all of the rejected images, or one that will show you all images regardless of which category they have been culled into. And if you look at the Culling score pane that's located directly below the assisted culling pane in the library module, you can see the individual culling scores that have been assigned to each image. This will show you exactly why the program decided that a given image was selected or rejected, along with a numeric score for some of those categories. The Culling score pane also has an option you can use to provide feedback to Adobe as to how well the function worked. And the feedback report lets you specify which culling functions worked and which ones didn't work, and you'll have an option to include your image when you submit the feedback report. Within the assisted culling pane are stacking options, and they allow you to automatically stack images together by either their time or their visual content. Click the Auto Stack button and then choose your options for stacking. You'll typically either stack by time or by visual similarity, usually not both. If you choose to stack by time, you'll use the slider to choose a time interval between your shots that will be used to determine the stacking. The wider the time interval you choose, the more shots that will be included in each stack. If you stack by visual similarity, you'll use the slider to choose the amount of similarity that's used to determine the stacking. The more you move your slider to the right, the more similar photos will need to be to each other in order to appear in the same stack. As you move it to the left, the less similarity will be required for images to appear in the same stack. In either case, either by time or by visual similarity, the dialog box will show you how many stacks and how many unstacked images will be created using your chosen settings, and you may adjust this as needed to control either the time interval or the visual similarity parameters. Once you click on that Stack button, Lightroom will stack up the images of your current folder or collection according to the parameters you have chosen. And it's this stacking by visual similarity feature that might come in handy for photographers even if they don't shoot portraits, which the assisted culling function seems to be best suited for. Stacking up your images by visual similarity is a great way to speed up your culling process because it will group pictures together by subject or content, and you can further review them. Below the stacking section, but still within the assisted culling pane, is a section labeled Organize Results, and that contains a button labeled Batch Actions. Once the assisted culling routine has run, and Lightroom has segregated your images into selected and rejected categories, you can then click on the Batch Actions button, which brings up a dialog box allowing you to apply various batch actions based on whether an image got marked as selected or rejected by the culling algorithm. Selected images can have flags and stars and colored labels applied to them, and they can be added to an existing or even newly created collection. Likewise, rejected images can also have flags, stars, and colored labels applied to them. And like the selected images, the rejected images can also be added to a newly created or existing collection. The one extra option you get with rejected images is that you can also choose to have them removed from either the folder or collection that you're currently browsing. Just another way to speed up your culling process. Here's a quick demonstration of how to access the same culling features within the import dialog if you prefer to do it there instead of in the library module. One advantage of using the culling assistant during import is that you can prevent Lightroom from ever importing what would otherwise be rejected images in the first place. This saves you from having to remove them later or even store them to begin with. Once you trigger the import dialog, click on the Assisted Culling option at the top of the screen to begin analyzing whatever source you've chosen for import. As with the library module version of this tool, you can set parameters for selected and rejected images, as well as use the auto-stacking features as needed. The layout is a bit different with the Assisted Culling pane on the left and the Culling Score pane on the right, but the function is otherwise the same. The one difference is that if you are doing assisted culling in the import dialog, you can tell Lightroom not to import any images categorized as rejects, and you can have it put the auto-stacked images into collections for you. Notice also that the import dialog has been streamlined just a bit as far as your action options are concerned. The choices for copy and convert to DNG, add, move, etc. have all been placed in a drop-down menu instead of being listed side by side. So that's the lowdown on assisted culling and auto-stacking. Now we'll move on to some of the other new features and updates in version 15, starting with improvements that Adobe has made to the distraction removal section of the Remove tool. Adobe has added a new distraction removal function for taking out dust spots. Open the Dust section of the distraction removal pane and click the Apply checkbox to have Lightroom automatically remove anything it decides is a dust spot. In general, I found this function works very well, and it doesn't seem to be too overzealous and take out details you might want to retain. Note that the dust removal section has its own Visualize Spots function that works identically to the one that's found in the regular Remove tool that we've had for quite a number of years now. They will both show you an X-ray view of your image with a slider that you can use to adjust contrast, and this can be helpful in seeing your dust spots against a bright background. With this new release, Adobe has updated the reflection removal tool to do a better job removing the kinds of reflections that appear in photographs that are taken in front of glass windows. The latest update does seem to do a more convincing job of removing these reflections and works in more situations than the earlier versions. I will say that I find this tool works best on images that feature large plate glass windows directly in front of the camera. It struggles a bit if the reflections are smaller or farther away from the lens in the scene. Landscape masking now includes a snow mask, allowing you to select and mask off snowy images within your photos. At the same time, Adobe has also added 8 new landscape-oriented adaptive presets with 2 for each of the 4 seasons. Adobe has added a new parameter to the point color adjustments that we're able to make both globally and within the localized masking system. We've had sliders to adjust the hue, saturation, and luminance values of the selected point color range for some time now. But we now have a parameter called Color Variance that allows you to take the selected color range you've chosen in point color and make it have more or less variety of color. In some other programs, this kind of feature is often referred to as color contrast instead of color variance, and it allows you to separate colors from each other or make them more uniform. By moving the color variance amount slider to the left, you're telling Lightroom to make all of the affected colors look more like each other and have less variety. By moving the slider to the right, you're telling Lightroom to make the affected color range have more variety and to look more separate or different from each other. You might use this sort of adjustment to create greater color separation of the autumn foliage in your images. This is a fantastic new tool and one I already find myself using to create greater color contrast within some of my floral and macro images, as well as my fall leaf pictures. It can be a subtle and effective way to give your images just a little more pop without overdoing things with saturation or contrast or sharpness. The color variance slider is the perfect tool for smoothing out uneven skin color. In the case of this photograph, the young man's cheeks and the bridge of his nose are a little bit more red than the rest of his face, and it would be nice to unify all of his skin tone so it looks more consistent. Now, I don't want to change the colors anywhere else in the image, so I'm going to start with a mask that affects just his face area. And I've picked a color of flesh sort of in the middle of his forehead here. And as I pull the variance slider down, it's going to make all of the other colors get more close to the color that I've picked. And as I do that, I can basically take out that red area across his cheeks and his nose, before and after. Shadow detection has been improved, and the Detect Objects function of the Remove tool now does a better job of including the shadow when detecting areas for removal. This almost always makes for better and more natural-looking replacement pixels. HDR editing has been tweaked ever so slightly to allow you more fine-tuning within the highlight headroom area. As they do with every new release, Adobe has made some performance enhancements with version 15 of Lightroom Classic. These include performance enhancements while hovering over presets, history, snapshots, and profiles, smoother performance while cropping with and without soft proofing enabled, using the Remove tool and moving the Edit sliders. It also includes better memory management in Windows and continued improvements for image loading and navigation while you're editing. One other performance tweak I wanted to mention. Open up Lightroom Preferences and click on the Performance tab, then go down to the section labeled Develop. That's where you'll find an option that we've had for some time to enable hover preview of presets, history, and snapshots in loop. I typically leave this enabled as I like being able to get a quick preview of a developed preset or history state when I hover over it with my mouse. Because that hover preview is somewhat processor intensive, Adobe has now given us the option to temporarily turn off the hover preview by holding down the Shift key while you're hovering. This is great for folks who are trying to eke out every last ounce of processor power from their computer to speed up their editing process. You can also disable the hover preview entirely if you don't use the feature. You will find a note describing the new Temporarily Disable option just below that hover preview setting. Video improvements now include the ability to export 4K resolution videos and slideshows. Native tethering support has been added for a number of Leica cameras, including the M11, Q2, Q3, SL2, SL3, and more. If you were using a third-party tethering plugin with your Leica camera, you may need to disable that before using the built-in tethering function. New library filters and smart collections have been added, allowing you to filter or collect based on likes, comments, synced image status, manual removal, distraction removal, and stacked status. The Folders pane has been tweaked to include a new indicator that will show you if any subfolder is missing. Parent folders with missing subfolders will have a small black circle with an exclamation point indicating as much. Opening up the parent folder will allow you to see which of the subfolders are missing. Any missing folders will be indicated with the familiar question mark icon as before. And once you've reconnected the missing folders, that new icon should vanish from the parent folder. Lightroom is now capable of storing and displaying time metadata for your images with a precision that includes milliseconds. This can be very useful in burst photography, given that modern cameras are capable of capturing images at 30 frames a second. Without that millisecond degree of accuracy, all 30 images would be displayed with the exact same capture time. Millisecond precision can be found in the metadata pane as well as in the Edit Capture Time dialog. This next improvement is one of those under-the-hood changes that most folks don't really need to pay much attention to. Lightroom Classic version 15 brings us some changes to how and when the ACR sidecar files get created. These changes are necessary for storing the AI edits that are being made to each image. In an effort to keep the catalog itself from getting bloated in size, AI edits are now being stored in each image's ACR sidecar file instead of in the catalog itself or by making a second DNG image file. Hopefully this allows for smaller catalogs and better storage footprint. Most of you can just ignore this new feature. Last but not least, Adobe has made some adjustments to the options for editing an image in Photoshop. You can now export images to Photoshop in 32-bit HDR file formats, and for standard dynamic range images, you can select from an expanded range of color profiles. Well, that covers everything you need to know about the brand new Lightroom Classic version 15. As always, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below or reach out to me online. For more Lightroom and Photoshop videos, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and go ahead and click the bell icon to get notified anytime I post a new video. And if you aren't already on my mailing list, head over to jeffhirsch.com and sign up for the mailing list, and you'll get updates on my classes and workshops and trips, along with bonus tutorial videos and articles for Photoshop and Lightroom. I promise not to spam your inbox, and I will never ever sell your address to a third party. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.